Page 27. The Psychology of Stupidity, edited by Jean-François. Section is Marmion. 3.0. A Theory of Assholes. A Conversation with Aaron James, Professor of Philosophy at the University of California, Irvine, and author of Assholes, A Theory. Question. According to your theory, what is an asshole? Answer. It's a man, or more rarely a woman, who accords himself special advantages in his social life and feels immune from reproach. The typical example is the asshole who cuts in line at the post office, granting himself a privilege that's normally reserved for pregnant women and emergencies. In the moment, he has no justification beyond feeling that he's rich, handsome, or smarter than everyone else, so his time is more valuable than theirs. If you ask him to stand in line like everyone else, either he won't listen, or he'll tell you to get lost. It's not that he despises other people, rather, it's that he doesn't think they deserve his attention. The moment that you don't understand how extraordinary he is, he decides you're unworthy of his interest. Question. Do assholes behave like assholes in every arena of their lives? Answer. Not necessarily. Someone can act like an asshole because he's going through a rough patch, it might be a bad week, or some hangover from his adolescence. But for me, the bona fide asshole, the true asshole, is consistently an asshole in multiple arenas, but not in all of them. He might be an asshole at work and on the road, but not at home, or the other way around. The all-purpose asshole, who's an asshole whatever the context, is rare. Stalin appears to have been not only a genocidal maniac, but also an asshole in every sphere. Question. Can extremely cultured and intelligent people be the worst assholes? Answer. The worst? I don't know. In any case, they're as bad as everyone else. Intelligence doesn't keep you from being a serious asshole. It can even contribute to it by planting the idea in the skull of the asshole that he's above the throng. Along with financial prosperity and beauty, intelligence is one of the qualities that make it easier to admire yourself and to attract the good opinion of others. This means that privileged people have a much greater risk of becoming eminent assholes. Question. So you're saying that assholery has less to do with intelligence or attitude than with the way we conduct ourselves in our social lives? Answer. Yes, it has to do with social behavior, but the internal tripwire is the failure to show interest in others. Assholes think it's up to everyone else to adjust to them, no matter what the situation. Oftentimes, some of their friends will humor them in that. And so one part of it is the social dynamic, but the primary cause is something personal and deeply rooted that's very hard to dislodge. Question. Is an asshole who's aware of his assholery still an asshole? Answer. The problem is that an asshole can be well aware that that's what he is, and be proud of it. Yeah, I'm an asshole. That's your problem. Awareness isn't enough to change anything. The asshole is so entrenched in his assholery that it's hard for him to question his actions. But it's not impossible. If he has an existential crisis, or a car accident, or a tragedy, he might take stock of himself. Or when he gets old. But by that time, it's mostly because he's low on energy or testosterone. And that's still quite rare. You can't count on it. In any case, awareness in itself is not sufficient to deeply affect the conscience of an asshole. Question. Can children be assholes? Answer. Although you might think so, given the egocentrism they sometimes display, I don't think you can include assholery among their fixed character traits. They change too quickly for that. But adolescents can go through soulish phases, though most of them grow out of it. It's really only in adulthood that assholery becomes constant and systematic. Question: how many adults may be considered assholes? 1 in 10? 1 in 2? Answer: everything depends on the culture, the subculture, and the social sphere. The ratio is much higher in the United States than in Canada, Italy, or Brazil or Japan, or for that matter, pretty much nowhere has less assholery than Japan. Of course, this changes all the time. I think there are many more assholes in the United States today than there were in the past, and they're a lot more visible because of the Medi answer. 1 in 2 would seem too high to me, no matter which country, because every society depends on the civility and cooperation of its members for its survival, and that's not the strong suit of assholes. Question: how can the persistence of assholes be explained? Do they have an evolutionary advantage? Answer: something probably went on with the behavior of primates and their masculine domination tactics, all those power games to reach the top that perpetuate the pattern of assholes believing themselves superior. But I don't think those factors played a very decisive role in the development of civilization and institutions, whose structure generally allows for the suppression of assholes. In a culture where individualism prevails, like the United States, they present more problems. Question: what can we do about them? Can we change them? Answer: I think they can change, but it's better not to get involved. Sometimes an asshole will be kept on in an organization, because he brings in money, for example, or academic prestige. Robert Sutton was right to propose his no asshole rule, 1, but that objective cannot always be achieved. A method must be found to marginalize them in multiple ways, and to join forces against them, because it's by dividing people against each other that assholes accomplish their goals. This is much easier in small groups than in a political context. But there's a lot society can do to reduce the number of assholes, even though it's hard, because they have a knack of blocking our path. Question: what about the assholes in our own families? Answer: this is both banal and very delicate. Often, you try to isolate the asshole. Sometimes it's that a woman can't, or doesn't want to, get divorced from an asshole, but tries her utmost to avoid him and to reduce contact with him. To preserve our mental health, there's often not much else we can do. Question: are assholes happier than ordinary people? Answer: good question. Plato and Aristotle formulated an objective vision of happiness, to act justly. That does not produce assholes. Also, the quality of assholes' relationships is abominable. All the same, whether he admits it to himself or not, and often this is not the case, an asshole may be happier than other people if you take a more subjective view of happiness, combining it with satisfaction. The asshole is satisfied with himself when he gets what he wants: attention, fame, money, power, prestige, everything he feels entitled to. But often, he can maintain his feeling of superiority only at the cost of enormous anxiety. Because, however good he is at this little game, and he's excellent at it, he needs to feel he's smarter than other people and to take them on, one against all, with no apologies, even in the thick of everyday interactions. Among dogs and gorillas, the male alpha often dies young because of the stress caused by keeping track of his rivals. Even if the asshole convinces himself that he's happy with his life, you'd like to say to him, you know, pal, if you were more accommodating, you'd be less stressed. Question: Are we secretly jealous of assholes? Answer: not really. You can feel impotent, frustrated, indignant when you're confronted with someone who repulses you. How can a person be that way? Emulation doesn't enter into it. But when assholes succeed, you can feel jealousy. That's how you get famous, by acting like an asshole. I could have done that. But he thought of it first, and he was quicker about it. If you're a bit of an asshole yourself, you can appreciate the technique of a connoisseur. But when you see an asshole on the highway, it's contempt you feel in the end. Question: should we feel grateful to an asshole, if only because he shows us that we're better than that? Answer: even if you learn to get along with one, I don't think it's possible to feel gratitude for assholes, unless they end up recognizing your value as a human being. You can always congratulate yourself on understanding them and handling them better, like I felt after I finished my book. But I feel no gratitude, because they do bad things for bad reasons with no consideration for me. They cause too many frustrations and problems. At the end of the day, I might sometimes think I've dealt with them or responded to them well, but I don't give them credit for it. I would have preferred not to have run into them. Question: in 2016, you devoted a book to the dangers posed by the election of Donald Trump. Do you consider him a supreme asshole, or is he worse than that? Answer: yes, Donald Trump is a supreme asshole, an A tilde 1/4 beer asshole, if you like. I mean by that he's an asshole who inspires respect and admiration for his mastery of the art of assholery, despite heavy competition from his peers. Assholes generally have to fight for the title of asshole in chief or baron of assholes, but few can match Trump's prowess at piling assholery upon assholery, Kim Jong-un, in North Korea, being a notable exception. Those who manage it for a time, like Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, often end up becoming more docile. Question: were there any assholes among the world's illustrious philosophers? Answer: it's funny, but I've written about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whose reflections on self-esteem are very important to our understanding of the mindset of assholes and the destructive dynamic it produces. But Rousseau himself abandoned his numerous children, and I believe I heard that he practically bought a 12-year-old girl and installed her in a little cottage to give him sexual favors. Despite his genius, in some ways he definitely resembles an asshole. Question: have any assholes congratulated you on the success of your book about them? Answer: yes, readers have written me to say, "Thank you for this book, my children gave it to me, and there's no question that I'm an asshole." Their comments have always been kind. Bravo. Well played. And some have even sworn that it was going to change their life and that they were going to behave differently. Not at all. As for the assholes I know, I don't know if they've read it or not. I try to limit my interactions with them as much as possible. Interview by Jean-François A tilde section is Marmion. Page 33.